Hello everyone, I hope you're enjoying the Equine History Collective Conference 2024. As soon as I saw the subject, equids, I thought yes, I need to do something for that, because one of my major areas of interest is the interface between equine power as we understand it, or equid power, and the arrival of steam. Coming from the northeast, that's very much part of my heritage, because that's where commercial railways at least were first introduced. So that's what I'm talking about: pack train to steam train, curiosities of the horsepower steam interface. I'm Dr. Miriam A Bibby, and the subject of my PhD was the Galloway horse or Galloway nag. Then the name became used by miners in northeast England as a generic for the ponies who worked underground. So there is a link to coal and steam from my PhD and this subject. I don't suppose I really need to tell you this, but before steam was developed as a power, as a means of generating energy and movement, what we had were basically ships and boats and pack animals of one kind or another. The pack animals could be horses, mules, donkeys, camels, all sorts of creatures we used, oxen, or llamas in South America, the various alpacas and other animals. But you also always had the alternative, your own 2 feet. Lots of people felt that it was better or more prestigious to travel in other ways, and that's how animals got involved in the human story. There were other ways of moving goods or people, of course, as soon as the wheel was developed. These are late examples of wheeled vehicles from Beamish Museum in northeast England. But I think the muck cart on the left is a type of vehicle that you could probably have found right back into antiquity, something very similar, for taking muck to the fields or for carrying vegetables back. And on the right hand side we have a brewery vehicle for carrying beer and other items, and in front of that a passenger vehicle. These were all taken at Beamish Museum on a special equine day when they were looking at the role of horses and other equids in the First World War. Now, you could also use animals to get yourself around without a vehicle or without carrying other goods as well. On the left we have King Offa and his entourage, and on the right he's riding an ambling horse note. They're very comfortable to ride, and they were very popular throughout Europe and the ancient world at one point, but they've gone very much out of fashion on the island of Britain, which is a pity because this island used to produce some of the most outstanding horses of this type at one point. On the right we have King Charles II arriving back in London on the restoration of the monarchy. He's riding a horse loaned to him by Sir Tom Fairfax, former general on the opposing side, on Cromwell's side. So there's a full circle there that the king's coming back, but he's still, his own horses have been dispersed. He's still dependent on the horses that have recently been owned by the Commonwealth. An alternative to riding, an animal of some kind, was of course travelling in a vehicle, and this you could do from ancient times onwards. I really love the one on the left because this, of course, it looks to me very much like a ladies' night out, a girls' night out in a stretch limo. Women generally travelled in these kind of medieval vehicles which went under various names, and here they are looking out of the windows of the vehicle as they ride along. On the right hand side we have a coach that's got itself very messily into trouble in a boggy area by the look of it, and this was not unusual for coaches to have problems such as wheels coming off and going off the road, getting stuck in snowdrifts and so forth. It was not a particularly safe way to travel, but it was the popular way to travel for at least a couple of centuries, until steam came along and effectively finished off coaching, first in Britain and then in other areas the use of steam became more widespread. It's all about what we understand today. in the modern world as logistics. How do you move things? How do you move people? First of all, you move them by ships and boats and other vehicles or on animal back. And here we have the example from the Bayeux Tapestry, and we see that William's war horses are all lined up symbolically along the front there, so you can see the message that we get from this particular piece of art is that William's bringing a lot of war horses with him, and there's also men on board that vessel. On the right hand side we have another alternative way of being carried, which is in a litter, a horse litter. This is Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth I, on her way to her coronation. In some parts of the world, people were carried on by humans. This was a popular means in the Highlands. A clan chief who had full authority over all the members of his clan could literally summon one of them up and say, "Carry me from A to B," and they would have to do that because they were under his authority. He was their leader, he was in charge. What we didn't have for a very long time, other than boats and ships, was a means of transporting the masses. So mass transport is another issue altogether. On the left, I've chosen these for their comic effect, really, as you can tell, but the one on the left is it seems to have been an actual vehicle used by the army, the British Army, for transporting foot soldiers, infantry from A to B. You can see it's rather like an Irish sidecar, jaunting car. The soldiers sit along the sides of the vehicle, and it looks mightily dangerous to me, I have to say. It's not the only one in the picture, there's one in front as well. Nobody looks quite in control of that situation there, and if it does turn over, I think it's going to be a horrible mess. On the right hand side we have from the early part of the 20th century, we have some small children being taken out by a rather sad looking donkey to take the air in their carriage, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this picture and found it quite as amusing as I do, but not so much for the donkey, obviously. Okay, so now we're getting into what happened when steam came along. The use of steam for commercial applications is very much a product of the northeast of England, which is where I'm from. I'm from Newcastle on Tyne, which you can see clearly on the map, and I want to point out some quick, interesting horsey and steam facts for you. The famous racehorse Whistlejacket was foaled in Northumberland, which is the big county you can see there on the border with Scotland. A lot of people don't know that. And the two famous founding father stallions were stirred on the border between Yorkshire and County Durham. So it's a very horsey area. This is the area where that part of County Durham and Yorkshire, that's the area where the thoroughbred racehorse actually developed. Again, a lot of people don't know that, and it's very important to understand that some of the narrative that we've got about the thoroughbred is incomplete or incorrect. But this is also the area where steam developed as a commercial prospect. The first railway, let's call it, to use steam was actually designed by Charles Trevithick, but he wasn't able to develop it commercially and died in poverty, which was sadly the case for a lot of pioneering and talented engineers. Prior to the use of steam, most railways had actually been horse-drawn. There were an awful lot of horse-drawn railways in Britain, and they were called variously tramways or wagonways. The names varied throughout the country, but they were all the same principle, and the same principle as you'd see with steam coming in later on. So the family that was responsible for the development of commercial railways came to the southwest of Newcastle upon Tyne in the sort of a section of Northumberland that's very close to County Durham, in a little tiny village called Wylam, and these were the Stephensons, who are a very famous name in my part of the world and elsewhere, of course. The father was George Stephenson, 1781 to 1848. Born in Wylam, Northumberland, the member of a mining family, he was the inventor of the safety lamp for miners. This is a very contentious topic because Sir Humphrey Davy also claimed that he was the inventor of the safety lamp, and it seems that he got a lot of the credit basically because he was Sir Humphrey, and George Stephenson was just a colliery lad from Northumberland, basically. He was the creator of the Stephenson gauge, the basic 4 foot 8.5 inch, well that's 1.435 meters standard gauge, which is used widely but not exclusively across the world. There have been a number of different gauges at different times. He created the famous rocket steam engine and Locomotion 1, which was the first passenger steam engine, and he's described as the son of a colliery workman without schooling. This is from a book on British history. Who became one of the most famous of all engineers. He started work, believe it or not, at the age of 8. It's incredible really to think of it, isn't it? And he was the man who eventually successfully won, so to speak, the Rainhill trials near Liverpool as to which engine was going to be running on the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. Okay, so that's George the senior, George, father of Robert Stephenson, 1803-1859. If George was responsible for really introducing both the concept and the application of commercial steam railways in Britain, Robert Stephenson expanded this. He was influential upon the whole railway, the idea of railways taking off across the globe. Now, what's interesting is he got a better education than his father. His father would have had a Northumbrian accent. I was just discussing this at a recent conference. The Northumbrians have a particular way of saying their R's, which is called the Northumbrian burr, and they would say Northumbrian like that. But it's Robert, having his good education, he probably lost his Northumbrian accent. So we can really say that Robert benefited from the success of his really hard-working father and talented father to live an even more successful and productive life. He's responsible also for bridge building and various other places, including the High Level Bridge in Newcastle and the Menai Straits Bridge. So yes, he's a very important figure too. There's also a famous myth, you've probably come across it, about the gauge, that it can be traced back to chariots on Hadrian's Wall, which of course is not far from Wylam in Northumberland. And they say that George Stephenson spotted ruts on the Roman wall that were the width of the chariots, where the chariots had been driven, and decided to apply this to his gauge, and that it's been carried forward to the space shuttle and all this kind of thing. This is a nice piece of mythology, okay, because there's been at various times there's been various gauges, but this one became the popular one largely through the work of the Stephensons. It's a nice story, but it is just that story, a piece of mythology, but I like it because it ties in very much with the local area. Okay. Now, the Rainhill trials were the famous the famous event where really we see the beginning of commercial steel use near Liverpool. A couple of interesting things that it might be worth knowing. George Stephenson needed horses to make this happen. While some of the equipment for constructing the engines were taken around by sea from the northeast of England to Liverpool, other parts were taken across the Pennines by horse-drawn vehicles. So that's worth knowing. He, right from the start, was still dependent on horses. The Rainhill trials, his famous locomotive Rocket was the winner. He also had another engine called the Northumbrian, which of course being a Northumbrian he'd pronounce Northumbrian. No, can't do it. Northumbrian. And which I always like the idea of. From here on in, we really see it taking off. I love this image. lots of reasons. You can see passengers and animals and goods being transported with a single loco. And along the side here, sorry, my cursor doesn't seem to be working. You can see, first of all, how the first passenger vehicles, they just look like a load of coaches put together, don't they? I think it was the great Danish archaeologist Oscar Montelius who developed this whole system of typology based on the development of railway coaches from horse-drawn coaches. Behind that, you see something really interesting, which is a carriage with people and a footman sitting on the back and what looks like a driver at the front, but no horses. I think this is probably the first wheel-on, wheel-off vehicle in history where you're pushed up a ramp or something and then pushed off at the end, where you either pick up your own horses, presumably transported in some sort of railway transport, or you borrow horses from your friends or whatever at the other end and complete your journey to wherever you're going. Behind that we see another carriage or set of carriages, linked carriages, that look exactly the same as coaches again. Then we see two carriages that are rather beginning to look a bit different. Behind that we see a kind of an open carriage. Then we've got the goods, then we've got the animals. So you can see there's all sorts of things, goods and people being transported. Now these new mass transporters come along. Okay. Now, so here are some of these interesting curiosities at the interface between steam and horse. On the right we have cycloped, which is basically a horse walking on like a tread, really, to motor the vehicle on rails. It was taken to Rainhill, but obviously it didn't fulfil the rules, so it was a bit of a curiosity there. Everybody was interested by it, but it was never going to win. On the left we see a 4-horse version called Impulsoria. And again, similar principle, we keep the horses, but and we keep the rails, but there's no steam power involved. These are a slight diversion from the topic, but I think it's interesting because people were clearly thinking about all sorts of alternative forms of transport at this time. And here we have the arrival of hobby horses, an early version, a prototype of the bicycle, which you just stand astride and push yourself along with your feet. And interesting, here we see women with hobby horses. You can see one in the back of the second picture on the right hand side. And the right hand side one is really prophesying what's going to happen, because the horse trainers, breeders, are going to go out, dealers out of business, because everybody's going to be riding these hobby horses. The horses are looking very unhappy and wondering what the heck's going on. The groom now is impoverished and unwanted and in rags. And the dealer is saying, "I'll warrant him sound and free from vice." And the person who's buying it is doing the usual dealery thing with the dealer and trying to talk him down. Says, "I can see he's been down once or twice, though, my lad." Somebody's come off that hobby horse there. And how interesting that they keep the name hobby horse. This is Goldsworthy Gurney's new steam carriage, London to Bath in 8 to 10 miles an hour. And again, you can see how it's exactly a carriage. It's just the same as a mail coach, basically, but now it's going to be powered by steam. This one didn't ever come into use, I don't think. Redundant, yes, you can see here a picture of a coach horse that's been made redundant, and the coach is rotting and in a farmyard somewhere, and meanwhile the triumphant train runs along in the background. But in rural areas, pack horses remained important long after the arrival of steam, right into the 20th century in some areas in Britain. And horses worked alongside steam for over a century, really. Here again we have Beamish Museum, horses and steam working side by side. These are examples from the 19th century of Yorkshire Gallowers and Aylesford Fussers, who was the lady there with her donkey Jerry, and she continued carrying goods over the Pennines right into the 19th century. Then at the 20th century, in Scotland, at Ben Nevis and on South Uist, there's still ponies in use. and horses continued to work in cities and for the railways until the 1960s. People didn't want to see them go, basically. You can still find examples of pack horses in the modern world. That's on a bridge in the south of Scotland, and the other is an event where they were fixing the fells, doing fell paths in the Lake District using fell ponies. And today, horses have a big part to play in mining and railway heritage. This is Lisa Walker and her pony Marley at Beamish Museum, demonstrating how ponies would have worked in the times gone by, drawing tubs underground. And I was absolutely delighted to learn the other day that the name for a railway enthusiast historian, a ferroequinologist or studier of the iron horse. Isn't that excellent? Thanks for listening.